certainly providing the most drama and therefore is generating the most headlines this campaign season. But there are, of course, several other statewide contestants to keep an eye on. On Monday, we'll be highlighting the race for state comptroller in our first general election debate. Tune in at 7 p.m. as incumbent Tom DiNapoli squares off against Republican challenger Harry Wilson in a live debate at Pace University in Manhattan. My first guest tonight is here to preview that matchup. Chris Callahan ran an unsuccessful campaign for state comptroller in 2006 on the Republican line. He lost that race to Democratic incumbent Alan Hevesy, who was at the time under investigation for misuse of public resources. Hevesy pleaded guilty and resigned not long after winning the election. Mr. Callahan, thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me, Caitlin.
Wanted to first speak about your race. You were in a very interesting position where Alan Hevesy was under investigation. Every day more and more was coming out, but you weren't able to take him out. What do you think happened there?
Well, the political landscape in 2006 was much different from what it is in 2010. It was not a good year to run as a Republican. That was, of course, the year that Eliot Spitzer swept into office, and of course, I had a terribly underfunded campaign. So we did what we could. It didn't work out for me, but at least as a result of some of the revelations that my campaign made, Alan Hevesy was no longer stealing from the public.
We'll talk about that. During your campaign, you were really behind some of the facts that came out, and then after he was elected, watching those revelations. What were you thinking at the time?
Well, I'm trying to remember what I was thinking at the time. You know, we ran the race. It was a good race. It didn't work out. I had no regrets. I wasn't kicking myself for not doing anything different. Happy with the race. Wasn't happy with the outcome, but in a sense, the process corrected what I would regard as the voters' mistake. They took Alan out. In my judgment, unfortunately, put Tom DiNapoli in, but the voters are about to correct that mistake this year.
Well, you say the voters' mistake, and when you look at the race for comptroller, that has to be the one that's the most under the radar, that people just aren't paying attention to. Why do you think that's an office that doesn't really drum up the fireworks that some of the other offices do?
Well, it's, you know, the comptroller conducts audits and manages the pension fund. Those are pretty arcane practices in the views of most people. It's not a policy-making office. So it really is very much under everybody's radar. But it is certainly an important office. The pension fund is what $150 billion, or
a lot of money.
The numbers changed a lot since I was watching it carefully, but it is a lot of money, and the comptroller is the sole trustee. So that's why it's very important to have somebody who's competent, somebody who has a financial background to watch over it.
And now, when you were running your campaign, Eliot Spitzer had first endorsed Alan Hevesy. He then withdrew that endorsement, made Hevesy pay back $90,000. I mean, what do you think didn't click with voters at that point, that there was such a scandal going on?
Well, frankly, I believe that at least some of the voters said, well, you know, we don't like this upstate rube that the Republicans have offered. We can elect Alan Hevesy. He won't stay in office. By the time Election Day was coming on, it was clear he was not going to stay in office. And the legislators will pick us somebody good. Well, they didn't do that. Tom DiNapoli doesn't have the credentials to have the job.
Well, you used two adjectives there, both upstate and Republican. Which do you think was working more against you in your race?
Oh, I don't know, and it really doesn't matter. The votes were as what they were.
Do you think Republicans have a better shot this year? You mentioned the mood is a lot different in 2010.
Oh, clearly. I mean, every poll suggests that across the country and in New York State, the public is disenchanted with the Obama agenda. And David Patterson, a very decent guy, has not acquitted himself well as governor. And the scandals in the legislature, it's a national joke. It's not. As it wasn't a good year to be a Republican in 2006, it's certainly not a good year to be a Democrat in 2010.
Well, the incumbent comptroller, Tom DiNapoli, is a Democrat. What do you think he's going to be up against this year, trying to get elected for the first time to that office?
Well, he's facing a competent, a man who's got impeccable financial credentials. He, in many years, it is an advantage to be incumbent. Certainly this year it's a disadvantage to be an incumbent. Harry Wilson has never been involved in politics. He's just got a spectacular resume. Tom DiNapoli came into office in a very, very flawed process. I heard him last night on this show brag about how many votes he got. He must have forgotten that those votes were all about Eliot Spitzer and proving to Eliot Spitzer, who's boss. Didn't have anything to do with Tom DiNapoli. So because the legislature was mad at Eliot Spitzer, we've been saddled with Tom DiNapoli for the past 4 years. He came into office, perhaps Fagan had left, but a lot of his gang was still left, and Tom DiNapoli didn't have the wit or the experience to separate the wheat from the chaff. So I think he's bumbled along. I know a lot of people who work for him, people in the civil service, are eager to see him go. He demoralized the office.
Well, let me jump in there because, you know, you're critical of his performance, but we are going to be hosting a debate between Tom DiNapoli and Harry Wilson on Monday. If there are things that you would be critical of, what do you think the public should have their eye out for this office, especially because, in your own words, you said it is kind of a dense office. It's hard to understand exactly what goes on there.
It is, and I think there's, you know, going back to my race, that was kind of borne out. Early in the race, we mentioned that Alan Hevesy had a kind of a nefarious relationship with Elliot Broidy, and it had already been published in the New York Sun. Nobody cared. It was completely ignored. We pulled on a thread of another scandal, and Alan Hevesy's suit of sanctimony disintegrated. But that was a real simple thing. He used a state employee as his personal servant. People that was, you know, something that everybody could grab onto. But certainly the bigger issue is managing the pension fund, conducting audits, and as I say, the auditors working for I was about to say Alan Hevesy, working for Tom DiNapoli are eager to see him go. He doesn't want to offend anybody. That's an awful attitude for an auditor to have. And he walked into this office, as they say, Alan Hevesy obviously had left, but a lot of the gang was still there, and so I think it's important. Harry Wilson is called to see his schedule, and I think that's so important to find out who he met with, because the place had not been cleaned out when he walked in.
Well, you say Tom DiNapoli doesn't want to offend anyone, and certainly both Mr. DiNapoli and Mr. Wilson have been called nice guys over and over again. They're both really friendly guys to talk to. What do you think, though, Mr. Wilson's strategy should be? Do you think he should come into this debate swinging, attack Tom DiNapoli, or keep that nice guy exterior going?
Well, I'm not ready to advise Harry on that approach. He is, I mean, I think he should come in and display the competence that he has. Now, it may not be that everybody will understand his explanation of some of the intricacies of high finance, but I think it will be clear that Tom DiNapoli doesn't either.
Well, certainly going to be a lot to watch out for during that debate. Mr. Callahan, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Okay, thank you, Caitlin.